All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm your host for today's broadcast, the same Layer 13, as we are going to get underway for the first of what will be 5 straight stints. That will be roughly 10 hours worth of racing here for TORA's 24 Hours Le Mans here in the C lobby. It's going to be a very interesting event today. The rules package, the car selection is going to be a 2010s, sort of early 2020s era GTE/GT3/GTLM layout. The prototype category is going to be made of the LMP1 prototypes that absolutely destroyed most of the records here at this circuit back in the mid-2010s. Real quick, let's look down the driver list so you kind of have an idea as to who's going to be running this event. Blocktoberfest, we want to give them a quick shout out. They're going to be in that number 23 711 Porsche GT3 machine, and Blocktoberfest is the host of this lobby, so thank you to them. We also are going to be seeing the number 30 Ferrari by Calco429. TNR Blade is going to be one of our hypercar drivers in the Toyota TSO40 hybrid. I love the TSO40 and TSO50, so I will try to not be biased, but those are my favorite hypercars without a doubt. I just love their look and their design and well, not hypercars, my favorite LMP ones without a doubt. So I'll try to be non-biased, but there's gonna be a little bit. There might be a little bit of bias. Anyways, NWR Origin is gonna be in the BMW M8 Big Boy, the number 157 entry. DR Ice, or I believe that should be Dr. Ice. Dr. Ice will be chilling in the number 93 TSO40. Apex Why Not will be running in the, I believe that is the 44 Porsche. Mr. Pineapple is going to be in the 4GT. Now, 4GT has not had a proper entry in a TORA endurance event for years, and finally this gets to break. I'm really excited to see what the 4GT can do today, because we have not seen this car in a proper TORA endurance event in years. In the last game, Forza Motorsport 7, no one could be confident in how it was balanced. It was either way too slow or way too fast. A lot of people had similar expectations in this game. However, it looks like that might finally change. Join Mr. Pineapple in the 4GT, although it's a different team's 4GT, is going to be AMS Phantom. Sadly, I cannot read the number on that machine. Then you have Baby Racing, who's going to be representing IFEA in that red and white number 531 BMW Big Boy M8. Unanimate is going to be in the Audi number 45, and that is not an Audi GT car. As you can see, that is the Audi hypercar. So Unanimate is going to be fighting with Dr. Ice and TNR Blade here. And we'll be fighting against AMS Jamesy. We can't see Jamesy's paint scheme right now, but Jamesy is going to be in another TSO40. Space Dog Mike is going to be in the number 27 TSO40 prototype for the event. ZR Amaryllis is going to be in the number 75 Porsche GT3 machine. EMC Rags is going to be in the number 85 Porsche GT3. VGT Aceler is going to be in what I believe is the 313 Big Boy BMW M8. I could be reading that one wrong. It might be 31 something else, but I think that's a 313. THR Zabari is going to be in the 69 Nice Toyota TSO40. Leechard is going to be representing the other Audi hypercar, or Audi prototype in the 822 machine. Then you'll have Arzium Lucas. They will be in the number 825 Ferrari entry. FRA Deerplot. Can't see their paint scheme yet either. I'm hoping that'll fix when they go onto the circuit, but they're going to be in another TSO40 Toyota. SRT Henrique is going to be in another 4GT. However, due to the lighting on that paint scheme, I am not able to tell you what the number is. Hopefully, we'll be able to fix that once they get onto the track proper. Then we have LMP Flow, who is in the lobby but has not yet gotten into their proper car for the event. So, for the moment, we are just going to be waiting until we get everything underway and get onto the track proper. Interesting change of pace. Typically for TORA endurance events, you are only required 3 pit stops in a stint, and you have to get all 3 of your pit stops done within the first 90 minutes of the stint. That's different this year. This year, you are required to make 4 pit stops within a event. So that kind of shakes up and kind of semi-randomizes how this is going to look today. That means that drivers will likely just be throwing on the soft tire compounds and just using the soft tire compounds all day today in all the stints. So don't expect anything crazy when it comes to tire strategy or people really trying to min-max their tires. TORA's endurance events are very hyper-focused on min-maxing distance and chasing lap time. It's not as focused for overall fighting. That's not to say you won't get some fighting, but they're normally more focused on min-maxing lap times. So don't be too surprised when you see that everyone's really just throwing on, only putting in like 30 to 40% of fuel in the fuel tank, throw it on soft tires, and then like 20 minutes later, they're back into the pits again. That's just how it's going to end up going today. Just don't be surprised by it. Some of the other things to consider, though, LeMans is one of the largest tracks in the game, with Fujimi Kaido having been added a few weeks ago. It is the third largest track on the game. We are using the version that do have the chicanes on the Mulsanne, so we won't be getting the ridiculous high speeds they had back in the 80s, but do expect some ridiculous high speeds. That also means that while the lap times are very long in distance, they are not ridiculously long overall. Just for a little bit of comparison, most of these cars would complete a circuit like Road America in about 2 minutes. The hypercars are going to be completing a lap here in about 3 minutes and 45 seconds, potentially faster. Also, in the GT category, this is something that applies more to the A lobby than our B lobby. Also, it looks like LMP Flow was in the 824 BMW. Do want to give you that update real quickly. It does look like several of the GT entries in A lobby were able to finally get the GT cars under a 4-minute time, if I understand correctly. So, even though Road America is also a very speed-focused circuit, you're really going a little bit less than twice the distance in lap time, and you're going, again, less than twice the distance in overall, twice the distance in lap time, twice the distance and lap time. I shouldn't say in lap time, but twice the distance and twice the lap time. So yeah, expect that. If you're looking at roughly a 4-minute event for per lap, GTs will have 100 minutes. Everyone has 100 minutes, but GTs will be looking at completing about 25 laps over the course of the race. For the prototypes, I would expect we'll be looking at something closer to 28 laps. Could be a little bit more fluctuation there, but I would expect something closer to 28 laps completed overall in each and every individual stint. The first 4 minutes, we're just going to see the lobby reorganizing itself on the front straightaway. They're going to be lining up in a single file order, and then once they get up to 4 minutes elapsed on the clock, they'll start rolling. And once the leader's front bumper has hit the end of the rumble strips right before the Dunlop Bridge, that is when the field will begin racing. But you only start racing once your car has completed passing that rumble strip right before the Dunlop Bridge. So we're going to go ahead and knock out an ad break here to try and get a little bit ahead of ads before we get into the event here. We'll be back shortly at LeMans. All right, welcome back to LeMans as we are still waiting for the lobby to properly load onto the circuit. Hopefully you don't have to go through too many reconnects. We are already running a few minutes behind, likely just trying to knock driver requirements out of the way. Remember, while these streams are anticipated to be roughly 2 hours long, the actual time spent on track is only going to be 100 minutes. Then afterwards, everyone's going to stop and be gathering their distances. Once everyone's done gathering their distances, we will go ahead and shoot some invites out to the top finishers and prototypes and GTs. However, they are not required to jump in and talk with us. We like to try and get a interview or two in per stint. Sometimes that doesn't happen. Before we get onto the circuit here, TORA staff themselves were nice enough to go ahead and give some talking points for each lobby before the start of the event. This is one of the things I really appreciate, and I really hope they do going forward, especially for me who, while I know some of these drivers, I'm not super familiar with all of them, so I'm going to miss out on a lot of the stories. But in the overall stories across the entire field as a whole, in the prototype category, there's only a single 919, and that 919 is going to be in the D lobby. So while we will not be carrying that, keep an eye on that. Only a single Porsche entry. Most of the entries this season are Toyotas and Audis. I think there may be one or two Nissans at the very back of the field, but the Nissans are kind of joke entries because they were front-wheel drive only and not all-wheel drive. In real life, they were not very competent, and they also were down on power because a lot of parts didn't get finished in time for LeMans. So the Nissans were not very competitive in real life, and there was no way to get them properly balanced in games. So the Nissans, I think there's one or two of them in the bottom lobby. Don't expect them to be competitive at all. It looks like for the majority of the event, it's going to be Audi versus Quattro. Also be aware that Bajezin, who had gotten his way into Indy 500 qualifying for TORA about 3 weeks ago, he's had one of the fastest times overall. He'll be starting on the pole in the top lobby. Also, Chinese invasion continues in the A lobby, and we'll keep an eye on them because later on I will be streaming a single A lobby stint later on. In GT overall, it's the VER team that is back on top in the overall poll. There also seems to be a lot of Ford and Ferrari entrants overall in the grid, and also the EXR team, after being absent for a few events, has gone back to the top. In C lobby, in this lobby that we're talking about today, the pole sitter is going to be Dr. Ice. And to really throw into perspective how much he was killing, he was actually one of the first drivers to qualify. Typically in TORA qualifying, you'll have a whole lot of drivers who are really aggressive on trying to get their qualifying laps in the last two scheduled times. The first few scheduled rounds really aren't too crazy. They're not really anything to write home about. But Dr. Ice did not min-max trying to get everything to get locked in for a last-minute qualifying run. They set their timer early on. They will be starting at the head of the grid. In the same vein, AMS and THR are both anticipated to maybe not be the strongest in today's first stint, but be stronger as the stints go on. Also, 1HOR and Sovereign will also be anticipated to be moderately strong throughout the entire event. So AMS and THR are going to be a little bit more peaky in their performance during the nighttime stints, but will be maybe overshined by 1HOR and Sovereign during the early and middle stints. Overall, the GT field is very highly looked forward here, and I will go ahead and say IFVA was given a special shout out by TORA staff because their overall BMW M8 and just their BMW loyalty is very highly appreciated, even when BMW is just not competitive whatsoever. So real quickly, let's go ahead and give you a look at what the starting grid is going to look like. Like I said, Dr. Ice is going to be starting on pole, number 93. Then it's going to be Unanimate in the number 45, Leishard in the 822, the 656 of AMS Jamesy, THR Azabi in the number 69, FRA Deerplot in the 365 machine, Space Dog Mike in the 27, TNR Blade in the number 9, and then you get down to the GT category, and it is maybe racing in the 531, starting that BMW M8 on the pole. In GT, then it's RZM Lucas in the 825 Ferrari, AMS Phantom in the 694 Ford GT, SRT Henrique in the 411 Ford GT, Heloco in the number 30 Ferrari. After that should be, oh, here we are. It's VGT Acceler in the BMW M8, then the 85 EMC of Rags in the Porsche, Apex Wide Knot in the 44 Porsche, EMS Hyphon in the 242 Porsche, LMP Flow in the 824. Come on. 19th will be ZR Amaryllis in the 75 Porsche, then Mr. Pineapple in the 73 Ford GT, Blocktoberfest in the number 23 Porsche GT, and NWR Origin will round the back of the field in another BMW M8 in today's event. So we should be getting underway on the racetrack in about 1 minute's time. Ooh, that's nice. So yeah, we'll actually see the field rolling through this camera angle here. Regrettably, because it is a timed race and not a distance race, I'm not going to be able to show you the actual in-game gaps between cars on track. So that's going to be the main reason why we're going to keep the map up through the majority of today's event. Also, I will try, no guarantee, but I will try to keep a track on the pit stops throughout the events of the day. But again, the anticipation is that everyone is just going to be running soft tires all the way through the entire event, so don't be expecting any wild tire strategies. This is not like the P1R Enduros I normally cover. This is honestly not even like the Sebring or Daytona Enduros I covered for TORA in the last few months, where people were really trying to min-max their tires. Expect no one to really have to worry too much about tire saving today. Yes, you don't want to be stupid with the tires, but don't worry too much about them. As we see the field rolling up to the Dunlop Bridge, and once the leader gets past the rumble strip on the left side, we'll be underway here. And we're off. Dr. Ice is already trying to put the freeze on the field, opening the gap on Unanimate. Unanimate is actually slid a little wide there, trying to get some heat into the tires after standing still for so long. Now, reminder, the hypercars in this category, with the exception of the Nissans, which do not run in this stint, all the hypercars, or prototypes I should say, they're all all-wheel drive. They are not legitimately all-wheel drive. We'll talk a little bit more later in the event over that. But that is very important to consider. These are all-wheel drive cars. That means that their handling, their performance is going to be very distinctly different from the GTs, and we'll really see that play out once they finally catch the GT traffic in about 3 to 4 laps. This is Fight the Back. This is TNR Blade and Space Dog Mike. And it looks like for now, Space Dog Mike has gotten ahead of Blade. Keep an eye on Blade because Blade's running this stint. But more importantly, Blade's also going to be running stint 9 and 10 in the middle of the night. He's an American like I am. And then he will have less than 2 hours turnover to try and run stint 12 to finish that run off. So keep an eye on Blade for him. The question is going to be reliability. And we already see Blade coming back on the outside of Space Dog Mike as they go into the second Mulsanne chicane here. But second place in the prototype grid is the 45, trying to keep another all-wheel drive prototype behind is the 69. Nanimate trying to keep Zarby behind. Zabri. Zabri looks to the outside, falls back in line, doesn't want to go side by side here in the most intense corner on the track. And now they pull out and rapidly get back up to full speed here. All right, in the GT category, while maybe racing may have started at the head of the field, it is Arzi of Lucas in the Ferrari that has already moved up to the top of the grid. Only 2 Ferraris in the C Lobby GT category. Again, the focus is that we'll see a lot of storylines developing across the GT category throughout today's events. So we're going to really want to keep an eye on that if at all possible. Maybe racing holding steady with second and third place and fourth place are 4 GTs. It is a beautiful sight to see 4 GTs here at LeMans. Doesn't matter if they're the 60s versions or the 2010 versions. AMS Phantom runs in third. SRT Henrique runs in fourth. We'll absolutely be keeping an eye on that fan favorite entry here. First time for the GTs going through the Indianapolis and Arnage corners here. Already there's been a little bit of a fall off near the back of the grid. Not a complete fall off, but these drivers farther back have kind of lost the grid. And it seems like there may be a bit of an issue with the Porsche GT entries. Why Not and Blocktoberfest have both fallen to the last 2 positions on track right now. Then you have NWR Origin, who is in the BMW M8. Then another 4 GT that is Pineapple just ahead of him is Flo. Meanwhile, we look back in the Prototype category, and Dr. Ice has led at the end of the first lap. It is still Zabri and Animate, AMS, Jamesy, and FRA Deerplot are going side by side for that 4th position right now. And Unanimate has actually fallen into their grasp. Unanimate might just lose 2 positions as they come under the Dunlop Bridge. Lost 1 already to Deerplot. But it looks like Unanimate has recovered just enough to put Jamesy back behind. Interesting thing with that 656, you see that they have a squatted rear end, raised front end stance. That stance is normally limited to just a GT setup. You don't typically see that in the prototype category. But Jamesy seems to be running squatted rear end, raised front end. So in real life, when race cars want to do that, or even non-race cars want to do that, the entire idea is to maximize straight line speed, although you run the risk of compromising cornering ability. The idea is to maximize straight line speed by taking that rear wing and yanking it out of the air. But that right there, that big slide going into braking, that's the reason why you typically don't see it happening on higher performance cars like prototypes or hypercars, because you need that downforce and you need that grip on the front of the car, and you need it to come from the aerodynamics. With that car's nose so high up in the air, Jamesy is going to have problem getting a good consistent braking line and getting the car to not move around on the nose every time he goes into the braking zone. So sure, we see on track he is way faster than the other drivers. He's able to beat most of them to the corners, but then he has a little bit of trouble getting through and navigating the corners properly. I won't lie, I'm a fan of maximizing your car for straight line performance, but this is a step too far for me. If you were anywhere that wasn't like Indianapolis Oval, I would be very hesitant to run a setup like this. But Jamesy out here is being very, very brave, really trying to rely on the all-wheel drive aspects of the car. Really want to keep an eye on their tire wear though, because with the nose raised in the air like that and less downforce on the car overall, I would anticipate that he may be one of the few drivers who will actually be dealing with accelerated tire fall off, because he is trying to negate drag by basically artificially taking away downforce. We'll keep an eye on their tire wear as the event goes on, but you can see how that setup lets Jamesy absolutely destroy Deerplot, Unanimate, Blade, and everyone else around him in a straight line, but he loses so much time in the corner. And look at that, in the Indianapolis and Arnage corner, the rear end is just sliding out because there's just no downforce going over the back of the car. So again, really keep an eye on this, because as I look throughout the hypercar field, or the prototype field, I don't see anyone else running this setup. It's only Jamesy, so we'll keep an eye on that as the event goes on. Meanwhile, in the GT category, RZM Lucas took the lead in the first lap, and he is not looking back. Maybe Racing is doing a good job holding on to second, but third, fourth, and fifth are all starting to come into play. This is Calco and a Ferrari GT3 machine. It's gotten by one of the Fords, but there's another Ford right ahead. Again, Ford versus Ferrari is kind of the big tail of the overall GT category across all of the entrants today. So really keep an eye on this. We may get an idea for what the overall lobby, the overall event is going to look like, because if the Fords have a significant weakness and we keep seeing them getting nicked and picked off by the Ferraris, that will suggest the Ferraris will have the overall advantage. Vice versa, if the Ferraris are getting picked off throughout the event, we could see it that obviously the Fords might have the overall advantage. That's not to say that we might not see a BMW or a Porsche end up with the overall GT win, but we're anticipating it's going to be primarily just Ford versus Ferrari, like the good old days of the mid-60s. As a drag race, as they come up to the S's here, the most downforce focused sections on the circuit, and Calco backs out early, lets Phantom get ahead of him, but this has brought Enrique back up to Calco's rear wing. Calco's a little wide, Calco's sideways, boy he's sideways, big drift, and that's gonna let the other Ford GT get back by. So it seems like that Ferrari may have a setup that is really maximized for straight line speed, but does not have the corner ability that they want. Meanwhile, apparently the game thinks we have to fight at the head of the category for prototypes, and yes we do. Dr. Ice now is trying to deal with a little bit of Zabri, trying to melt his concentration in that car. As they're flying down the back straightaway, Dr. Ice leads. Zabri has the draft. It looks like Dr. Ice's attempts to put the chill on the field has come to an end, as the THR entry is tucked up right behind nose to tail as they accelerate up over the hill on the back straightaway and dive into Mulsanne. Zabri didn't go for an outside move here earlier. It does not look like he's going to try it again this time. Oh, but Zabri not very confident in the car, really kind of putting some angle in the steering under braking, trying to make sure that the tires didn't lose all their temperature. And that is one other thing to consider that is very distinct to just LeMans and just LeMans issues. Because you spend so much time running in a straight line, you have 4 very long straightaways here all in a row. You do have a big risk of the tires losing temperature in the fronts. Now, it's not going to be as much of an issue for the hypercars that we're following now, but it still will be an issue. Dr. Rice slides wide, and here comes Zabri. He'll be on the outside as they come into our nose. Dr. Rice holds the inside line. Zabri's trying to square himself up for a faster exit. Did not make it work. Zabri touches the outside wall. I don't think there's any damage to that car. No damage. He should be able to continue without too much issue. But that got way closer for Zabri than I think he wants to admit. Really trying to maximize the overall distance on track. And now Zabri slides the rear end as they come into the curves once again. Through the Porsche curves. And each corner here gets gradually slower and then slower and then slower. If you have a good aerodynamic setup, a setup that really specializes in downforce, these are the corners that it has the most impact on. Most of the rest of the corners here are more about mechanical grip. There are some exceptions, but here, look at that. Zabri may not have the downforce that he's looking for, but he's got more than enough mechanical grip, and immediately coming out of the Ford chicanes and onto the front straightaway, Zabri is right back behind Dr. Rice again. Zabri looks to the outside, now falls back to the inside there, nose to tail, as they come up to the Dunlop chicane. Under the bridge this time. Dr. Rice is the one sliding the rear end out just a bit. Through the Dunlop S's. Dr. Rice opens up a tiny gap, and then Zabri immediately starts closing in. I believe that Dr. Rice has a setup that really specializes and really focuses in cornering, especially with the aerodynamics. Zabri, I think, is in a setup that is a little bit more focused on mechanical grip, probably is thrown off as much downforce as possible to maximize mechanical grip here. And this will be very important because they come up to the first of the Mulsanne chicanes. If Zabri has a good mechanical grip, he should be able to get right alongside Dr. Rice from here. Dr. Rice cuts the course just a little bit, should still stay legal though. Zabri's right behind, a little closer than he was through the last straightaway. Third place is FRA Deerpot trying to close in on this fight right now. Look at this, just about nose to tail into the second Mulsanne chicane this time. Dr. Rice went a little bit too deep, slides wide on exit. Zabri has a run, but is it not to get alongside? Yes, it is! They're side by side for a lead! Just briefly, but they were side by side for a lead in the hypercar category. In the prototype category, now Zabri falls back in line behind Dr. Rice. Back uphill, literally nose to wing here. Under braking, I imagine Zabri gets on the brakes a little earlier, does not want to run the risk of bumping and dumping Dr. Rice in the corner. That would obviously get him a massive penalty. But look, they are once again almost nose to tail on the run down to the Indianapolis and Arnage corners, and a car, one of the hypercars, has had an accident farther back there, smacked the outside wall, but we still have this fight there, side by side, bumper to bumper, door to door, under braking. That's gonna be Dr. Rice. He is melted. Zabri has melted Dr. Rice's focus, and Zabri goes to the lead, slides a little wide, and goes in the dirt, twitches. Here comes Dr. Rice back, out through Arnage now. You can hear the tires squealing, but Zabri has the track position, now starts to pull away. Now the time has come. We need to figure out who it was that hit that tire wall. I don't think it doesn't look like it's Jamesy. Maybe no one had any damage from it. I don't see anyone here with damage. Still looking, but yeah, it doesn't look like anyone hit damage, but I most definitely saw someone hit that tire wall on the outside coming out of Arnage, but maybe it was just enough of a glancing blow that didn't have any big impact. But at the head of the field, Zabri now leads over Dr. Rice. And here's the big weakness for what we believe is a more downforce focused build for Dr. Ice. If you have a build that's more downforce focused, that is fantastic when you're in clean air, when you have no one in front of you. But the moment someone gets ahead of your car on the racetrack, the moment that happens, you will be dealing with a significant loss in traction, primarily over the front wings, because what's happening is that the air in front of your car is being disturbed. That means that it's easier to push your car through the air. That's great for straight line speed. That means that every time you get in the corner, there is less air slowing the car down and pushing the car onto the circuit, which is where aerodynamics get the majority of their work. That means that you'll be faster in a straight line when you're in someone's draft, but that means that your turning ability is going to be massively reduced. So now Dr. Ice may be dealing with a little bit more troubles, although Zabri might be far away from Dr. Ice. That may not matter too much. Zabri might have pulled away from Dr. Ice enough that Ice is now going to be in comparatively cleaner, undisturbed air. Now we look down to the GTs and look at this gap that RZM Lucas has pulled on the rest of the GT category. It is SRT Henrique in the Ford GT who has fought his way up into second in category right now, ahead of Maybe Racing who started third. Then is this fight that will not die between a Ford and a Ferrari. Palco and AMS Phantom keep going back and forth, just keep sliding their bodies of their cars all over the circuit here. It looks to me like AMS Phantom has another one of those classic squatted rear, raised nose cars. Interesting thing with the Ford GT, the Ford GT generally is accepted to have way superior aerodynamics than everyone else. At this circuit, LeMans, that might not be the biggest advantage because you don't necessarily need great aerodynamics. You just need competent aerodynamics. It's usually, oh, and the Ferrari's around! Calco is spun right in front of Phantom! What's happened to Calco that caused that? There's no damage, but Calco has lost control all by himself just before getting into the Porsche curves. From the camera angle, I couldn't tell exactly what the cause was, but I wonder if Calco tried to take too much speed into the corner, broke too heavily, locked at the tires and spun it, trying to get on circuit, but now Calco has lost a significant amount of time on track. And that's going to drop Calco well down the order. So now, fifth in the GT category will go to this BMW M8 of VGT Acceler, and the highest Porsche at this moment in GT is ZR Amaryllis. So we're going to go ahead and knock out an ad break. We'll be back shortly here for more action at Circuit de la Sarthe. Welcome back to Circuit de la Sarthe as we watch Jamesy and that squatted hypercar go around the outside of an Animate and put himself back in the fourth position here as they come into the first. The Mulsanne chicanes immediately on Animate, gets right behind the Quattro, but then the moment they get into the straight, that Quattro starts opening up the gap once more because of the way that squatted position keeps the rear wing out of the dirty, well, keeps the rear wing out of the air in general and really maximizes the car's straight line speed. An Animate has just enough of a draft that lets him pull up alongside. I imagine an Animate should be able to make this overtake. Stick, there's a little bit of contact! Just a bit of contact. An Animate is the one who's worse off from it, and now an Animate is under pressure from TNR Blade. That's EMC Rag, second to last in the GT category. Why Not's already made a pit stop potentially for damage mitigation, but here we are, side by side. Unanimate, Jamesy, neck and neck, Blade's there as well. Around the outside is Jamesy. Can he hold it on the outside? No, he drops 2 tires in the dirt, and that's gonna let Jamesy and Blade get by. Well, Blade and an Animate get by, so now Jamesy falls back to 6th in this fight, but Jamesy has superior straight line speed. Try to look to the outside, he's gonna try to make it 3 wides and come up to traffic. Not quite 3 wide, but they split the GT cars on multiple sides of 3 wide across classes, but not within the single class. And look at an Animate with maximum confidence going into the first corner in the Indianapolis Arnage section, and Unanimate goes to 4th, right ahead of Blade. And Animate really causes his rear tires to squeal in agony as he throttles out of Arnage. Here comes Blade now. Blade's trying to set himself up to have the ideal inside line of choice as they come up to the Porsche curves. Oh, sideways by Blade. Blade had to back out of it because the rear end got so squirrely on it. Let's Animate go back in, but Blade makes contact with the rear end of Animate. Right in the highest speed section of these corners. Now the corners get gradually slower and slower through here, and you want to fire out of here for this nice longish run to the Ford chicanes. Blade is still tucked up right behind, and here they are coming to the pits, it looks like. Is some of your hypercar category, your prototype category. Not all of them though, but an Animate and Jamesy both making their stops early. Meanwhile, at the head of the grid, we are going to start seeing more and more drivers in the GT category making stops, and the way this is cycling out, our leaders in the prototype category is not really in a position to catch GT traffic and be hindered by them, at least not by a significant amount. Already, DICE has gotten by about half of the GT cars, not on track merit, but just because of pit stop sequences. So this is great for Dr. Ice. The other thing, though, is that Zabri, who was leading, is in the pits now. A long road into the pit box for him. Oh, and there's damage. We've missed this. But Zabri, who took the lead about a lap ago, has had an accident somewhere and has destroyed the rear of his car. So Zabri, who was running right at the head of the field, we missed it during the commercial break, I believe, but Zabri has destroyed the rear end of the car, and this is going to shut him well down the order. The only good news for Zabri is that with the number of pit stops we're required to make, this shouldn't completely derail his performance. He should be able to recover some overall distance, but for a man who is in the lead and starting to pull away, this is really going to cause him some frustrations. So now, for the first time today, we see our leader in Hypercar finally come up to GT traffic. That is Pinap. We'll get along inside and pretty much by him before they even get to the braking zone. This looks like it's almost the perfect spot for one of these prototypes to catch GT traffic, because you can just out-accelerate out of every corner. The all-wheel drive system in these prototypes. Already, Dr. Ice has gotten by all but the leader in this category. As Maybe Racing, who, while they're not the fastest, it looks like they're going a little bit farther on their tire runs right now. Dr. Ice is going to be held up just a little bit here coming out of Arnage, but the gap that Dr. Ice has on FRA Deer Plot means that doesn't really matter. Deer Plot's going to be struggling a little bit more potentially, although I think they'll be able to outrun most of this GT traffic by the time they get into position. This is going to be the real interesting one to catch, because Blade and Leachard are going to be catching GT traffic just as they get to the Porsche curve, so we could see some level of fighting for these positions, 3rd, 4th, maybe even 5th, depending on how it goes for Space Dog Mike here. Leachard comes right up, pulls alongside, Bold, confident move. Look at that gaggle of GT cars ahead. Dr. Ice Payne now the head of this grid here. Leaford stuck behind. Origin goes around the outside. Off track, they'll probably be looking at that post race. Leaford now tries to get to the inside of the Porsche. But now Leaford comes into the pits along with everyone else who is not yet pitted in the category. So for Dr. Ice, this has gone incredibly well. It's cleared most of the GT traffic without issue. And most of the GT cars are actually going to be pitting as well. But there are exceptions. In the GT category, look at this. It is LMP Flow and ZR Amaryllis. They are on a strategy all of their own. They have gone 2 laps farther than the earliest pitting GT cars, a lap farther than the majority of the GT field. They're the only 2 cars that have not yet made their first stop. And again, in today's event, you are required to make 4 pit stops in the stint, not 3. So I do wonder what the strategy is here with Flo and Amaryllis. I wonder if maybe they have a setup that chooses through tires a little faster, and they're choosing to run this first stint on medium tires, trying to go nice and long on medium so then they can throw on softs and not worry about any tire fall off to the end of the event. The other advantage of going long in a stint like this is that if you have an accident later on, you're not necessarily put in as much of a hole when it comes to trying to make numbers later. It doesn't keep you completely out of the hole, but it should put you in a better hole. Fight, drag race for the lead, and it looks like the Porsche, which has not really been very high performing throughout the early stages of this first stint, now leads on an off-sequence strategy in the form of ZR Amaryllis. LMP Flow falls back in line. In second, real quickly, look at the tire life. 39s right now for Flow for Amaryllis. 40s. So yeah, I do think that these 2 are running their first stint on medium tires, and we'll likely see them just run softs only to the end of the event here. It's always interesting to see drivers try and run an alternate strategy in a TORA event where TORA makes all of the efforts possible to flatten out the strategies and make sure there will be no strategy variations across the field. So trying to see how this is going to work out is definitely going to be something to keep an eye on here. Third place in GT right now is the Ferrari of RZM Lucas. Lucas has been dealing with quite a bit of hypercar or prototype traffic in front and behind them. Then it's SRT, Henrique, and maybe Racing. AMS Phantom would be 4th once our 2 leaders finally make their stops. Good news for Lucas here, though, is that it looks like most of the prototype cars will be by him before they get into the more technical corners on the circuit, so Lucas should not have their laps upset too much by the higher category of cars. The alternate strategy is Amaryllis and Flow. Another thing to consider as well is that if they're once they make their stop, well, they'll still have 3 more stops to make, they may be able to get away with putting in a little bit less fuel in the tank that could shorten up the amount of time they spend on pit lane. If you can't cut out an entire pit stop, might as well minimize the amount of time you're required to spend on pit road overall. Only problem that this duo may deal with is that they are going to have some hypercars coming up on them. And look at Flo cleanly around the outside of Amaryllis. That was very, very smooth and confident. See, Amaryllis is in the Porsche. He's got another one of those squatted rear end, raised front setups. And Flo, who has a more traditional setup, is able to immediately just go by him in the Porsche, because it's usually one of the harder corners to make overtakes on. And now through the Ford chicanes at the very end of this lap. And it is Flo that pits, but Amaryllis is going to stay out again. So Amaryllis is going very far on their tires. And they're only at 44% on that left rear. Whatever strategy Amaryllis is on, this is going to be really interesting to watch, because Amaryllis is now 3 laps ahead of the earliest pitters on strategy. He is on a strategy all on his own right now. The other thing to watch is going to be Flo. Where is Flo going to end up after completing their pit stop? Up to 70% fuel. That is a lot of fuel going into the car. We know we're gonna see several GT drivers get by, but how many? There goes Lucas. We knew that Lucas was gonna get up ahead. There goes Enrique. There goes Maybe Racing. Where's Phantom? Phantom's that 4GT in the background. Flo is out pit road that has to get the tires up to temperature. Origins and Phantom are fighting behind Flo. The 4GT lunges, but goes off circuit, could not get alongside. And now Origins gonna go back in front as they go under the Dunlop Bridge. This is great news for Flo. Maybe he'll get his tires up to temperature in time. The big problem though is that he'll get his tires up to temperature just as they get onto the back straightaways, the first of 3 back straightaways here, the Wolfsong straight, and then immediately Flo is going to be dealing with the tires, losing temperature all over again. But if he's far enough ahead of Origin, if he has broke the gap between himself and Origin, then he could have put himself in what will be overall 4th position in GT. So it's going to be very interesting to keep an eye on how this plays out. So it is a strategy fight in the GT category right now that we are keeping our eye on. Bad news for Flo though is that Origin has caught him. Origin looks to the inside as they go into the first corner. There's a little bit of contact, bumper to bumper, between Flo and Origin. They accelerate out, but it looks like Origin's got him. And now he's brought AMS Phantom out to play. So while Flo had the track position, the tires just did not get up to a reasonable temperature and did not stay warm enough, long enough. And while he had the track position, does not have the tire temperature yet. He's trying to fight back now. He'll be on the inside coming to the second Mulsanne chicane. He's got the car about 2/3 of the way ahead. Origin breaks deeper. Origin will have the inside on. Oh, just hip checked him right on track to not even trying to give him room. And now AMS Phantom is by as well. And AMS Phantom, the 4GT, now looks to the outside. Drag race as they start coming uphill. Flo has to draft off both of them. For Amaryllis, this could be a problem. Where is Amaryllis going to end up when they make their stop? Not yet at 50% tire wear. We're going to knock out an ad break, and when we come back, we should see Amaryllis, who is your current leader in the GT category. We'll see where Amaryllis on this alternate strategy will end up in relation to the GT field here. Welcome back to Circuit de la Sarthe. And while the strategy failed for LMP Flo, who has fallen to about 7th in GT, it's worked out for Amaryllis. Amaryllis stayed out for a long time in that Porsche, is now cycled himself to 3rd overall in the GT category, and is not that far behind Enrique, but maybe feeling some pressure from maybe racing farther back. But also, while we were away, Unanimate in one of the Audis made their second stop incredibly early in this event. And that brings into one of the other big topics of conversation throughout the day. In the prototype category, the Audis are believed to be generally faster, but they have a very, very fragile gearbox. The word is that the gearboxes constantly fail, constantly break. Unanimate didn't have the worst gearbox, but he had a little bit of engine damage. Might be partially related to the gearbox issue if he was being too aggressive with it. But either way, Unanimate had taken about 4% in engine damage. That would be the equivalent of losing about 30... Let me see here. What's the amount of power we're putting out? We didn't get to see, apparently. Okay, so I guess we're not allowed to see how much power they're putting out. But if they're putting out the 900 horses, which is why I believe that the amount of horsepower that the prototypes are putting out, you would be losing about 36 horses in the straight line. So Unanimate feels that was obviously too much, went ahead and pitted, but in the process has fallen behind Zabri to last. Also, Zabri, who had to pit early after having a spin off track, we did not catch it on camera, sadly, but Zabri is still stuck second to last in the category, has not really been making any forward progress. The majority of the prototype field seems to be stuck on roughly all the same strategy, and it looks like Dr. Ice, while not being the overall fastest in lap time, has been the most consistent in lap time thus far. And then you have FRA Deer Plot. Why would you call yourself Deer Plot? It brings horrible, horrible ideas to mind. But Deer Plot didn't start right near the front, but moved up to third, then inherited second a little bit later. And Deer Plot's been relatively quiet here. AMS Jamesy has been the real interesting one, because we've talked about Jamesy running this really squat setup. This is normally a setup that we see kind of half and half in the GT category. You don't really see it being run a lot in the top categories, whether they're hypercars, prototypes, IMSA DPIs, or whatever. Typically, you only see this kind of squatted setup on GTs, but Jamesy is making it work. He is running third on merit right now. DNR Blade is back there in fourth. Then you have Leechard. Leechard was in the middle of the fight, but has gradually lost touch with it as this has gone on. Then you have Space Dog Mike. Mike was a little bit higher up early in the event, but has kind of stabilized out in this position in sixth right now. And then it goes to the two cars that we were talking about earlier. Also, praise the Lord, praise Ahura Mazda, praise whatever deity of your choice. We do not have any lagouts thus far. Everyone who has started this event is still on track right now. 40 minutes into the event, we still have about another 60 minutes left to go here of racing, so there's still lots of time for things to change, but for now, everyone is still on track. Very, very fortunate right now. But again, we'll look at Zabri once more. Zabri has probably had the biggest and, in turn, most frustrating racing story thus far today. Zabri started near the front, and on lap 3 took the lead from Dr. Ice. The two of them fought for about half a lap, but Zabri was so much faster when it came to the slower quarters. They just completely destroyed Dr. Ice throughout the majority of the corners here. And while Dr. Ice was a little bit better in the Porsche curves, everywhere else, Zabri was faster. Zabri got into the lead, opened up about a 4-second lead, and then had an accident, crashed, destroyed the rear of the car, and fell to last, now only second to last, in the prototype category field, and has still not made any significant progress trying to make the ground back up there, off strategy and trying to make ground back up. In the GT category, RZM Lucas has been far and away the fastest driver on track in the GT category. Did not start at the front, but has been staying at the front for the majority of the day. The only time he has not been at the front is under pit stop sequences. Enrique, similar story. This Ford GT qualified upper midfield, but gradually worked their way up to the second overall in the GT category. But third place, ZR Amaryllis. This is the really interesting thing. In today's TORA LeMans event, you're required to make 4 pit stops. Jamesy is already making a stop. Is Jamesy have damage on his car? Is there damage on Jamesy's car? He just cooked the tires. There's a little bit of transmission damage. I think Jamesy just burnt up the rubber. Something has gone wrong because there's a little bit of transmission damage, but normally you would just want to stick with it. The tires are at 30%, so maybe thought it wasn't good to go for another lap, but Jamesy came early. But anyways, back in the GT category, the story I was talking about. it was ZR Amaryllis and LMP Flow. They started on a harder tire compound. I believe it was the mediums while everyone else was running softs. And Amaryllis and Flow went a lap longer than the majority of the rest of the field. Amaryllis actually went 2 laps longer than the majority of the field. It cycled out that while Flow fell all the way back to was 7th, now 6th overall in GT, Amaryllis ended up in 3rd and now has not only track position but has a tire offset advantage that he'll likely be able to continue to the end of this race in that Porsche. So while I don't know if Amaryllis in this course really has a way to run down the Ford at the head of the field, Amaryllis is running down Henrique and might be able to catch 2nd. This is a really, really interesting thing to keep focus on. Like I said earlier, TORA does everything they can to try and flatten out strategies, try to make sure that no one is going to win a race doing some min-max strategy weirdness. So seeing 2 different drivers really committing to off-strategy shenanigans very early on in the event is really interesting. This is something we almost never see here. I'm going to be keeping an eye on those 2 for the rest of the stint to see how it plays out. This could have a knock-on effect on how other drivers strategize their stints for the rest of the run. Other things to take note of, Apex Wynot had an accident earlier in the event. It's completely lost touch in the GT category. Blocktoberfest, who was the lobby host, has gone ahead and made their 2nd stop very early. Don't know if something happened to them. And there we are, RZ and Lucas, your leader in the GT category, along with SRT Henrique. Both pit. This will put the lead back in ZR Amaryllis' hands. VGT Acceler and EMS Hyphen also pit at this stage of the event. So about 45 minutes through, and drivers are making their 2nd round of stops. Seems like a lot of drivers are really going to be trying to min-max the positioning of their 4th stop and try and make their 4th stop as close to the 10-minute cutoff as necessary. That's the other thing that really kind of makes strategizing in TORA difficult, but not difficult because it's hard to do. It's difficult because it flattens out strategy, and why I'm really interested in what Amaryllis and Flo are doing. You are not allowed to make your final pit stop on track in the last 10 minutes of the event. Now, if you have to make an extra pit stop due to an accident, repair, or something like that, you are allowed to do that. But generally speaking, you must get all 3, and this event, all 4 of your pit stops done by the time that race timer says 0 hours and 30 minutes left. If your final stop is after that point, you are in trouble. A lot of the drivers I'm looking at right now, they are timing it to where that final pit stop is going to be maybe within a minute or less of that timer. They are really, really trying to cut the line close here. I think there's a lot of strategy, a lot of, okay, well, if I push really, really hard and go really, really aggressively, I might be able to catch that number in time. I would not be surprised if some of the drivers near the back of the GT category field end up with penalties due to making their final stop too late because they just aren't far enough along, and by the time they make it into the pit lane, they're not there in time. Either that or those drivers farther back in the field may be required to make their pit stop a lap or 2 earlier and kind of break their sequencing. And again, this really ties back into the Amaryllis and Flo thing, because Amaryllis and Flo are on a radically different strategy. They went about 30 minutes on their first set of tires and have just been blitzing away. I half wonder if the 2 of them aren't aware you're required to do 4 stops. It's supposed to be they may still think it's supposed to be 3. We'll have a better idea later on, but I am assuming, out of some hope for myself, because I love a good strategy battle, I'm hoping that Amaryllis and Flo are aware of the rule change and have figured out some way to try and game the system and get ahead on a strategy offset. And right now it's working for Amaryllis. He is running in completely clean air right now. AMS Phantom and Mr. Pineapple having a little bit of an issue there coming out of the Mulsanne corner. Flo has actually cycled up back to 4th overall in the BMW. Again, Flo was on a strategy similar to Amaryllis's, but he pitted a lap earlier, so Flo should be a little bit more relaxed when it comes to making the mandatory 4 stops. Please tell me someone didn't just lag out. No, it says Wynot's left. And Wynot, who was dead last, had completely lost the back of the grid here, seems to have fallen out, so now it is Blocktoberfest. He's also nice enough to host the lobby. is the one that is last in the GT category. Other thing to keep in mind, there's really not been any issue with GT traffic holding up the prototypes. The prototypes have gotten by GTs. Second, this will be a third time for a lot of them now, but it's really not been a thing that's kind of upended and upset the prototype cars. And RZ of Lucas is way farther back than I thought he would be. Granted, you'll get a lot of these positions back once those leaders pits. And speaking of which, there's NWR Origin, who's pitting now, and will be joined by Calco and Phantom. So is Lucas far enough up to get back ahead of them? Well, as I said that the prototypes were not being held by GTs too much, that's second place FRA Deerplot, who was very significantly held up by Lucas there. So now we see Dr. Ice and Deerplot both pitting, so the majority of the prototype field are all making their second stops now. Am I wrong? I thought I read in the TORA briefing that you're required to make 4 stops in the event. But the way this is going, most of these guys will be able to make it in 3 stops. Did I miss something here? All right, well, Lucas goes right by Phantom, Calco, and Origin without too much of an issue. Origin just now got out of the pit lane. Maybe racing is second. Maybe he's been going a little bit farther on the fuel and tires than the other GT cars, but not as far as what Amaryllis or Flo have been doing. Also, in the prototype category, Leechard has actually gone ahead. Yes, I know it does seem like I jinxed. Why not with that DC? But Leechard is now your leader in the prototype category, has stayed out a little bit longer. Again, I thought maybe I'm wrong, because the numbers I'm mapping in my head suggest that everyone could make it to the end on 3 stops. But I swore I read it as 4 stops in the driver's briefing. Because I did real quickly before starting the stream, I pulled up the TORA docs to get an idea as to where the restarts were, what the strategies were, what everything else. I thought it said 4 stops. But a lot of these drivers are set up to go to the end on 3. And for those of you who asked about EMC Rag, sadly no, the number 85 Porsche is nowhere near anyone else on track. Has about 2/3 of a straightaway on Blocktoberfest, and is about 2/3 of a straightaway behind Hyphen right now. Hyphen, Rags, Blocktoberfest, and, well, it's really just Rags and Blocktoberfest have just kind of lost the touch with the rest of the field here. So Leechard, who is on a interesting little strategy all on their own, going a lap farther than everyone else. Real quickly look at the tire life, 41% on that left front. A little bit of engine damage, but that shouldn't be enough to really derail them. We're gonna go ahead and knock out an ad break here. And when we come back, we'll see where Leechard comes out in relation to the rest of the prototype category traffic here, and we'll also see if maybe Racing and Pinap make their second stops in the GT category. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Circuit de la Sarthe, and Leechard in the prototype category has really got us a bit confused. This is now 2 laps farther that Leechard has gone compared to the majority of the hypercar field, or the prototype field. And I guess during that ad break, I did a quick look back on the rules and regulations for the event. And it most definitely says everyone is required to do 4 stops. So unless there are a lot of drivers who are not aware of the change and still think it's 3 stops, or there are a lot of drivers who are going to be doing some weird shenanigans with like stopping and then stopping the very next lap near the very end of the stint, I feel, I could be wrong, but I feel like we're gonna be looking at a scenario where drivers might get post-stint penalties. So now I have to ask, what would the penalty be if you do not make your mandatory 4th stop? Because look at this, Leechard right now has about 36 minutes to knock out 3 pit stops. That's basically 1 pit stop every 12 laps. That means that he would have to pit, run about 3 laps, stop, run about 3 laps, stop, run about 3 laps, and then, after all that's done, still you have to go about 10 more minutes to the end. Because again, all of your stops have to be done before that race timer says 00, 30, 00. And the numbers I'm working in my head don't work out. Now, I am thinking of a possible change, a possible strategy kerfluffery that might happen. So on big tracks, the bigger the track is and the smaller the pit road is relative to it, you can normally get away with doing more pit stops. You're not really going to hurt yourself. But on tracks where your pit road is long, or tracks where the pit road takes up a very significant amount of strength away, it's really going to hurt you. And here we come, Leechard's coming in the pit lane now. Real quick, I want to look down in the GT categories and see if they're going to be making stops. But there is a bit of a mathematics when it comes to planning your strategies here. So I'll use a comparison between Mugello and Road America, because both of those circuits are very, very long circuits, and both of them have their straightaways on the circuit, on the very long circuit next one straight. Amaryllis is pitting this time, and I imagine Flo will be joining them. Yes, Flo will be joining them. So lead in GT will go back to RZ and Lucas. Where is Leechard going to end up in relation to the prototype traffic? But anyways, in the comparison between Road America and Mugello, at Road America, pit lane is about 70% of the length of the entire front straightaway. At Mugello, pit lane is only about 30% of the length of the front straightaway. This means that as long as you're in a car that has a respectable amount of straight line speed, it is fine to make extra stops at Mugello because you can claw back more of your overall lap time by having that shorter pit road and more time to get back up to speed. The amount of time lost in the pits is going to be negated. At Road America, you want to minimize your number of stops, although that's incredibly hard to do because of the way that track is set up. But because of how long that pit lane is, if you can cut out a pit stop, it will put you massively ahead of the rest of the field because you'll spend more time at speed. Even if it's a reduced speed, you'll spend more time at speed and you'll be cutting off a much, much larger section of downtime. Here at LeMans, it's a little bit more unique because the pit lane exit takes you right past the forward chicanes, so you cut out one of the more technical sections on the track, but also you lose a whole bunch of time on a straightaway. It's not one of the bigger straightaways, but you lose a lot of time on a straightaway, and you barely enter the Dunlop chicanes with significant speed. So, one theory that I think could happen, and I bring this up because I have run this in a GT4 league before, is that potentially some of these drivers who look like they're setting up to not make it to the end on their stops, what they may be doing is they're trying to do a normal 3-stop strategy. But at the very end, when they would normally make their 3rd stop, they will come in and change only tires or come in and only do fuel. And then the very next lap afterwards, do the opposite. Do only tires or only fuel, whichever one didn't get taken care of. That way, instead of spending about 4.5 to 5 seconds in the box both times, you would only be doing about 2.5 seconds. The changing tires takes about 2.5 seconds of time, and refueling all the way up would only be about 2.5 seconds. It's a risky strategy. and you're really just kind of trying to play numbers that might not get you a lot of advantages. Again, I've tried this strategy before. It was in a GT4 series, so not really indicative of this, and it was a very mixed results type of thing. But maybe that's the strategy you want to go for. Maybe making an extra stop, both your third and fourth stops both being really short, is the way to go. And Origin has dropped out. And Origin, who is on track for a top 5 result in the GT category, has dropped out in the BMW. Also, I missed this, but while on their alternate strategy, Amaryllis has now jumped ahead of Henrique. So Amaryllis is actually closing the gap down between themselves and RZM Lucas. Again, Amaryllis basically has a positive tire offset to the end of this race. Lucas is on the generally accepted main strategy. Amaryllis is on a strategy all of his own, and now we're seeing Amaryllis running much shorter stints. Still has a tire advantage, but as the fuel and tire wear goes away and they pit and then repit, we'll see it go more and more in Lucas's favor. Amaryllis will maintain the advantage, but the advantage will reduce as it goes on. And Jamesy slow coming into the pits. No damage to the car, but he is slow coming in, only at 31% tire wear, a little bit of transmission damage, but I would think that with just 1% transmission damage, Jamesy would tough it out. But again, we're an hour in, Jamesy is pitting now, so Jamesy has been pitting roughly once every 20 minutes. At that rate, Jamesy would make their next stop with 40 minutes left. Yeah, Jamesy is basically on what should be the normalized strategy, split everything into perfect 20-minute stints. And that would be the best way to do this all. So Jamesy is on what would be the easiest variation of the strategy. And now you see Henrique coming in out of third place in the GT category, and Henrique is on that same strategy. So everyone else who's not Jamesy and Henrique seem to be a little bit offset, trying to maybe sneak out some sort of advantage, but I think everyone else is kind of committed to an alternate strategy a little bit too late to really get any significant benefit out of it. So Henrique and Jamesy, Henrique in GT and Jamesy in prototypes, they are on the more established, mathematically simple strategy. You're required to make 4 stops, so cut a 100-minute race time into 5 stints of 20 minutes. So the 2 of them are on the normal strats. Everyone else is doing something a little bit different here. Not really sure what the end strategy is going to be and how it's going to work for them all. Because I think everyone else, if they've committed to an alternate strategy, has come a little too late. Blocktoberfest can be added to that list as well. Meanwhile, on track, at the head of the GT field, it is still the Ferrari of RZM Lucas. But you can see on the sides of the camera that Amaryllis is closing. Amaryllis went very low in the first stint and is running down Lucas. Looking at the tire life for the Ferrari. 27% on the rears. Doesn't have a lot of fuel left, so Lucas will probably be paying this lap or next lap. I imagine it'll be this lap. Amaryllis, though, 27%. Amaryllis is going to be up for a much longer period of time. Is there a possibility that Lucas gets caught by Amaryllis by the end of this lap? Because that Porsche is running down the Ferrari. One thing to consider, as you can see, Amaryllis in that Porsche has got that squatted stance to really maximize the straight line speed here. Lucas has a little bit more traditional setup. Unanimate in fourth in prototypes is making their stop now. Most of the prototype category battles have long since fallen apart. All the prototype cars have all kind of ended up in their own zone, just chasing their own lap times here. GT is where things are a little bit more interesting. Look at this gaggle. We're about 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 13 to 17th, all are within about a third of a straightaway of each other. And right at the head of it is going to be this fight between Calco and VGT Exceller. So this is a Ferrari versus BMW fight. Bit of a slide there by Calco, but maintaining their position for the moment. Lucas hitting his Ford GT out of the lead, so once again, Amaryllis will go to the top. Maybe Racing, will they pit this lap, or are they going to go a lap farther like they did last circuit? So maybe stays out a little longer. So maybe went shorter on their first stint, but is going longer on the latter stints. Not really sure what the strategy is for maybe, but the BMW entry is trying to make something work. That is Flo just behind. Flo has a positive tire offset against maybe, although it's not as significant as what Amaryllis has. And while Flo lost positions after staying out longer, the overall tire offset has meant that Flo now is spending more and more time in cleaner air, and we're getting a better representation of what Flo's actual pace is. Dr. Ice and Deerplot pitting out of the front of the prototype field now. But this is the fight for the GT in second position. Keep an eye here. Flo has the tire advantage over Mady. How far will Flo push this? Zabri making their next stop. Zabri is actually ended up briefly ahead of Jamesy, but we're going to see Jamesy get back by Zabri here. And same case with an animate, so whatever's happened to Zabri, I think it's forced Zabri to run a alternate strategy that is more focused on conserving fuel and tires. So while Zabri, one of the fastest drivers early on, trying to make it on just 4 stops, I think their day has been completely derailed to the end here. So Blade and Leechard and Space Dog Mike all have yet to make their third stop in the prototype category. In the GT category is Pinenap, Calco, Flo, Mady, and Amaryllis, and somehow Mady is still staying ahead of Flo. Flo caught the BMW, but now the gap between them has kind of stalled out for the moment. So while Flo is running a strategy that is a less extreme version of Amaryllis' strategy, they do not seem to be able to really push the advantage as far as Amaryllis is. And as I say that, Amaryllis is pitting this lap. So Amaryllis now is really jumping onto an alt strategy and shortening up the gaps between pit stops now. So now Amaryllis has about 22 minutes left to make the rest of their stops. Hulko will be going in the pits, but Flo is the one who stays out a little longer this time. So these strategy offsets become curiouser and curiouser. But where is Amaryllis going to end up in relation to Lucas? Because Lucas was ahead of Amaryllis, but Amaryllis was running the gap down. Lucas has spent this entire last lap in clean air on fresher tires, but the tires aren't ridiculously fresher than Amaryllis in the Porsche. Before chicanes once more. You see Mr. Pineapple and Hulko still in pit lane, but Amaryllis is already out. Where is Amaryllis? There goes the Ferrari on the outside, and yes, Lucas is still ahead of Amaryllis. In fact, it looks to me like the gap has actually opened up in Lucas's favor just a bit. So that strategy offset might not work anymore for Amaryllis because the tire differences between them are not big enough now to really give Amaryllis the advantage anymore. In fact, if anything, it looks like Amaryllis is closer to being caught by Henrique. But now it is Flo and maybe Racing who are both staying out longer. The BMW's at the front leading. Blade and Leacher now paying out the lead of the prototype category. Everyone has about 20 minutes left to knock out their final stop. For Space Dog Mike, he has 2 more stops still to make. For this duo here, Flo and maybe they still have 2 more stops to make. I anticipate that this duo will make their 3rd stop on this circuit and then make their, I guess they're trying to hope to make their final stop just as they get into the pits right before it gets to 30 minutes left. But a lot of drivers trying to jump onto alternate strategies, trying to really spend more time in cleaner air. I just don't know how much advantage it's giving them. And Jamesy is making his 4th stop with what's basically 30 minutes left in the event. Did Jamesy take damage in an instant or something? No damage. So for whatever reason, Jamesy is going to make this final stint a really long stint. It's not like his tires are significantly worn either. Jamesy is just on a radically alternate strategy. Meanwhile, I missed it. Curses. But Flo has got maybe Racing coming out of Mulsanne chicane. As now pulling the gap open to himself and the pole-sitting BMW. So his M8 on M8 action at the head of the field. Maybe is not letting Flo go though. He closes it under drafting through the Indianapolis and Arnage corners once more. Flo slides that rear end out just a bit. But there's nowhere here for maybe to clearly get by. What the devil? What's happened to Lucas? Lucas has lost a huge chunk of time. What's happened to the Ferrari? I don't see any damage, but Lucas, who was leading and actually opened up the gap to himself and Amaryllis, now he has fallen behind Amaryllis, has fallen behind Enrique. And Lucas and the Ferrari GT that has dominated most of this event has now lost time. He's not lost a ridiculous amount of time, but he might still be able to get by Henrique. But now Amaryllis is in cleaner air ahead of Lucas now. The Ferrari GT has to get elbows out and fight hard and dig deep in these closing 28 minutes. What's happened to cause this? Maybe Racing making their stop. But look at this. Flo is not stopped yet. Flo continues to stay out. What in the devil is Flo's strategy? And what of Lucas? Can Lucas do anything to get back by Henrique and get back to Amaryllis and win the stint like he believes he rightfully should after spending so much time in the lead on the main strategy? We'll be back at Circuit de la Sarthe in about 90 seconds as we have to knock out mandatory ad break here. But the event continues to grow curiouser and curiouser in the GT category. Welcome back to Circuit de la Sarthe. Lucas has got by Henrique with a simple draft overtake on the first third of the Mulsanne straight. And now Lucas is trying to run back down Amaryllis. Lucas had the advantage on Amaryllis. It actually got a big advantage on Amaryllis on track. But something went wrong. I'm guessing Lucas spun out somewhere. Fell to third. He's got back to second and is trying to run down that Porsche GT for the victory here in the GT category. Farther back in the GT category, driver we've not really spent a lot of time focusing on, EMS Hyphen in the 242 BMW M8, has kind of been invisible most of the day. Not really had a big instance or small instance, just kind of been hanging out in this lower midfield portion of the event, having a bit of a fight with the 4GT of Mr. Pinap. Pinap is on a alternate strat, but I keep saying alternate strat. So many drivers are all trying to do different things with their strategy. There's not really a single default strat anymore. The Hyphon hasn't really done anything crazy thus far today. He's just kind of hung out around here in this about the 10th or so position. Oh, he gets hip checked by a prototype there in Indianapolis. Doesn't knock him off circuit, so he should be able to continue without issue, obviously. And Flo finally pits out of the lead here in the GT category. Still has one more mandatory stop he'll have to make. Lucas is not able to get away from the 4GT of Henrique. And here comes Dr. Ice, the leader in the prototypes. Clears without issue. And Henrique has a run on Lucas. So while Lucas was able to get by Henrique, he can't get away from Henrique. He's going to spend so much time just trying to defend. I don't know if Lucas will have the ability to just run down that Porsche. But he may not have to. Amaryllis seems to be bleeding off time on his own merit. Flo ends up in 4th. Flo is now the driver who seems to be overall in the better position and who has gained the most. So it seems like the overcut generally is the better option. The problem is, because everyone is making 4 stops, you can't just overcut endlessly. You will run out of time to make your final stop. Flo has 13 minutes to make their final stop. There's a lot of fuel in that car for me to make their next stop in 13 minutes. Meanwhile, Lucas is now finally pulling away from Henrique in a straight line. So Henrique in the 4GT seems to have a car that's much, much better suited to the corners. And the Ferrari is pulling away in the straights. In fact, that Ferrari is slowly running Amaryllis down in every section of the track. In the straightaways, he's closing it down. In the corners, he's closing it down. It's not by massive amounts. It's not like there's one section of the track that Lucas is destroying Amaryllis. But he's taking off a half a tenth here, a half a tenth there, and the Ferrari is running down the Porsche. And remember, all these drivers still have to make one more stop in the GT category in the next 12 minutes. Some of the hypercar, or I should say prototypes. I keep swapping hypercar and prototype. I do apologize for that. But some of the prototypes gain by, but catching the GT traffic in a straight line means that's really not going to be too much of an issue for the majority of the field here. I calculate it's about a 2.8 second gap between Amaryllis and Lucas right now. Here comes Leacher. We'll blitz by here. Get by Lucas without too much issue. Amaryllis may have to deal with this prototype right up his rear wing going through Indianapolis. Oh, gets to the inside of the Porsche and will deny the Porsche. The inside line that will slow Amaryllis down. You can see the rear end really sliding as he was forced to take an alternate line, a line that Amaryllis is not really used to. comes Unanimate. Can Unanimate clear the Porsche? Yes, he'll clear the Porsche before they get to the braking zone. Just touch the dirt just a little bit. You can hear the tires squealing. Look at this. You can visibly see how much closer Lucas has gotten just in this lap. They'll have 10 minutes left to make their final stops. Enrique in third is going to be pitting now. So Enrique wants to run the last 20 minutes on the same fuel and tire load. Not really trying to do anything unique or crazy with their strategy. Hyphen in 17th making their stop. There's also this fight between Flo and Maybe Racing. Flo is just a little bit ahead of Maybe right now, but this fight for third could go in either direction, honestly, between these two BMWs. Right on board with the Ferrari of Lucas. Oh, Ferrari's really wide there. It goes over the bumps. It's going to kill the exit momentum. I'm going to let Amarillas actually open the gap up just a little bit going down the straight here. That's the best thing that Amarillas could have seen happen. You can see the gap actually opening up as that Ford GT slid wide coming onto the first third of the Mulsanne straight. Now they go into the first of the chicanes. Lucas is really playing aggressively with track limits here, trying to run Amarillas down. We won't really know if there's going to be any suggestions or any submissions for track-cutting penalties for Lucas. I see him get all four tires off track a few times, but I don't know if it's something that TORA is going to make an issue of one way or another. But you can visibly see how Lucas has closed significantly. The gap was about 300 feet going into the first Mulsanne chicane. Now coming out of the second one, it's less than 2/3 of that. The gap is visibly closing. Seven and a half minutes. Make your final stop. Enrique, Hyphon, Rags, and Blocktoberfest in the DT categories have all already made their final stops. Jamesy in the prototype category is the only one to have already made his final stops. But as I say that, Dr. Rice is trying to put the freeze on the field, telling everyone to chill out as he is making his final stop now. And we'll run the last 17 minutes on this set of fuel and tires. Briefly, Deerplot, who's going a little longer, will go into lead. Unanimate, who's been fighting the top 5 positions, will also go ahead and knock out their final stop as well. This is the important thing we're watching, this fight for the GT category lead. Space Dog Mike gets by Lucas before the braking zone, but now Mike has to get around Amarillas in the twisties. And yet Lucas is the one that slaps the wall. Amarillas is holding station. I think Lucas might be pushing himself a little bit too hard, as now we're seeing Amarillas opening the gap back up. And Lucas is going to pit now, but Amarillas will stay out on track a little longer. The overcut has been more powerful. So could this be it? Is that going to be enough for Amarillas? Maybe Racing is also going to go ahead and pit now. So we're likely going to see Amarillas and Flo pit next time by. Acceler pits, Phantom pits, Pineapple pits. And this should put Henrique all the way up to what should be third on track, well, fourth on track, as Calco has yet to make their final stop. For these drivers making their final stop with what will be about 11 and a half minutes, well, about 11 minutes left, they may have the advantage of putting slightly less fuel in and making their pit stops just a few fractions of a second shorter. But is that going to be enough? I think the biggest advantage of the overcut has just been positioning. And with Amaryllis already having the track position over Lucas and Flo already having the track position over Maybe, is that going to be enough? When it was all said and done with, Henrique still ends up behind Lucas, but is still ahead of Maybe Racing. So Henrique might be positioning himself for a third place finish in the Ford GT. Not doing anything crazy with strategy, just cutting the race into nice, even portions all throughout. In the top category is only Jamesy and Unanimate and Dr. Ice who have made all their mandatory stops. Space Dog Mike, Zabri, Leechard, Blade, and Deerblot all have yet to make their final stop, and they will likely be doing it this time around. So pit road is going to be very busy over these next 4 minutes, I imagine. Oh, Deerblot, what in the devil is that one? Cut the track so aggressively they actually hit the inside tires on the curb, on the inside curb, and kind of throw himself off circuit there. All right, so Deerplot's in. Blade is in. We anticipate Leechard and Zabri will be in. Here comes Dr. Ice. Got about 3.5 minutes left. Zabri runs right ahead of Dr. Ice. This was the position the two of them were in earlier in the event, but Zabri had an accident and is only here now over Dr. Ice on a pit stop alternate strategy, and once it's done, we'll see Dr. Ice likely re-inherit the lead, unless Deerplot has absolutely put in an incredible banner of a lap, but I don't think that's going to be the case. Yep, that was pretty easy. Dr. Ice easily clears Deerplot. Deerplot only now gets out of pit lane. All right. So now our focus is on GT. Lucas made his final stop a little bit earlier, well, about a lap earlier than what Amaryllis has done. The overcut has been the better way to go throughout most of the event. So unless Amaryllis has made a mistake, this fight for GT Stint victory may be over. There's less than 2.5 minutes left, so yeah, there's no way Amaryllis, Flo, and Calco have to make their final stops now. Flo is in a fight with Maybe for what should be 4th overall. Amaryllis is not stopped! What is going on? Is Amaryllis not stopped? There's only 2 minutes and 10 seconds left! He does not have enough time to get back around! What is going on with Amaryllis? There's not enough time for him to get around! TORA mandates that you must get all 4 of your stops done before the race timer says 30 minutes! And it takes about 4 minutes for a GT car to get around! Amaryllis might have not only thrown away a stint win, but may have thrown away even a top 3. I do not know what the penalty would be for willingly making your final stop later than what is required. I do not know if it's a disqualification. I do not know if it's a distance penalty. But if it's a distance penalty, could Amaryllis say, screw it, I'll go for the distance penalty. I can outdrive the distance penalty. Because one thing that might be working in Amaryllis' favor is that Lucas, the guy who will be the leader, has been cutting the track so much today in this last run that Lucas might also be looking at a post-stint distance penalty as well. So yes, Lucas might inherit the lead as far as we think, but Amaryllis might still have it depending on how big the distance penalty is. Reminder, a mile is 5,280 feet. If it's a 5,000 foot penalty, that is roughly a mile. That would be 1/8, well, a little bit more, that would be closer to like 1/9, but about 1/8 of the lap here. If it's a 10,000 foot penalty, that's a little bit less than 2 miles. That would be about a 1/5 of the track penalty. But again, Lucas has been cutting the circuit a bunch as well, so if Lucas gets a distance penalty post-event, Amaryllis could still end up with the stint win. But again, the other thing is, though, that Amaryllis, if he still makes his final stop, because here's the thing, if Amaryllis just ignores, does not bother making the final stop, the penalty will likely be larger. Oh no, he can't do that, there's not enough fuel left. So Amaryllis will have to pit this time. The penalty will be lesser, but Amaryllis on track will likely still end up, I imagine, ahead of Lucas, but not as far ahead. And again, it may just come down to penalty counting. And the rule book does not specify, I checked the rule book earlier, it does not specify what the penalty will be. If it's a disqualification, Amaryllis is hosed. But if it's only a distance penalty, the fact that Lucas will likely be looking at distance penalties as well, it may not matter. So controversy in Stint 1. As the GT category, the top 2 drivers in GT, both are looking at penalties for completely different things. And if both of them get big enough penalties, the win of this stint might go to SRT Henrique. Now it's not saying that Henrique hasn't been cutting the circuit. Maybe he has, and I have not seen it. But Lucas has been a lot more visibly obvious on track when it comes to track violations. All right, Amaryllis making their final stop now. So we're gonna see Lucas close in on Amaryllis here. But what are the penalties going to look like? And the frustrating thing about penalty ball, not really ref ball, it's ref ball if the refs are just playing around and crap, but this is, in both cases, is a very blatant case of drivers, a lot more blatant with Amaryllis than Lucas, but it's a case of drivers obviously flaunting the rules. We don't really know what the final result's going to be here. All right, coming through the Ford chicanes. It'll be about 2 more full laps between Amaryllis and Lucas. Where is Amaryllis compared to the Ferrari? Amaryllis is already out ahead of the Ferrari. But that gap is not very big. And the wild thing is, this could work out well for Henrique. Henrique's not right on top of the 2 of them. But distance penalties might hand this stint win to Henrique. Amaryllis finally makes his stop, but is about 2.5 minutes too late. So we'll be back here at Circuit de la Sarthe. We have to knock out an ad break here, and then we'll be on track on the run to the finish here. All right. We are here in the last 2.5 minutes at Circuit de la Sarthe. Most of the field is honestly on about the same 60% of track right now. But things have been very interesting. As we are in the final moments, real quickly we'll look at the prototype category. Dr. Rice took the lead early on, started in the front as anyway, but got passed by Zabri by about lap 3. Zabri went ahead, got to the lead, opened up about a 4-second gap, and then had an accident that gave the lead back to Dr. Rice, and Ice has walked off with this lead without any question. There was a little bit of pit sequence off-sequence strategy going on, but in the end, there's not really been any real fights for position in the prototype category most of the day. In GT, though, this is where things have been really interesting. RZM Lucas, while he didn't start up front, took the lead on the first racing lap and opened up a big gap, was running a normal, traditional strategy. But as it went on, Lucas found himself losing more and more time to Amaryllis, and after making the 3rd round of stops, Lucas had a big gap on Amaryllis. It looked like he was going to have just enough gap to hold it. But while we didn't catch it on stream, we believe that Lucas spun off at some point, and in the process, lost the lead, even fell behind SRT Henrique III. Now, Lucas closed a lot of the gap down, but did so by doing a lot of track cutting, and there might be a lot of post-race distance penalties assigned to Lucas due to that. So you would think, okay, that should make it very easy. Amaryllis is going to win in the GT category as we're in our last 30 seconds, but that may not be the case because Amaryllis made his final stop after the mandatory required time. His final stop was late, so Amaryllis is likely going to have a distance penalty assessed, but we do not know how big the distance penalty is. So Amaryllis might still win this stint over Lucas just due to track cutting by Lucas. But there's also a possibility that 3rd place Henrique will win by just having a smarter run. As time is up, over, plow, the car has come to a stop. The session is over. The stint is over. In prototype, it is Dr. Rice, who is your winner, followed by FRA Deerplot, then TNR Blade, then Leechard, then it's Uninanimate, THR Zabri, AMS Jamesy, and Space Dog Mike. Credit to Zabri for recovering to 6th, but overall that is not much compared to the lead that he had early. In GT, we could see this go any number of 3 different ways for the winner. Amaryllis ahead, but we'll have a distance penalty for making the final stop late. But how much of a distance penalty is it going to be? Lucas is 2nd. But Lucas will likely have distance penalties due to track cutting, significant amounts of track cutting. And then SRT Henrique. Is Henrique close enough to the top 2 to get the stint win by just being a cleaner driver? LMP Flo, who was on his own alt strategy, has taken 4th. Colco got 5th in another Ferrari, and maybe Racing started up front, but has just kind of gradually lost time throughout the day. And the IFEA BMW will have to be satisfied with 6th, although depending on how penalties come out, that might be higher. 7th will be VGT Acceler in that BMW M8 there. Then AMS Phantom in a Ford GT, followed by another Ford GT in the form of Mr. Pineapple. EMS Hyphon will be 10th. In another BMW, EMC Rags in a Porsche, 11th. 12th will be Blocktoberfest in another Porsche, while NWR Origin and Apex Why Not will not finish the event. So we are going to go ahead and knock out another ad break here. And hopefully when we come back, they'll get the TORA officials will get the majority of their distance counting done, and we might be able to talk to some of our top finishers. Prototypes may not have a lot to talk about, but I'd love to talk to any of our top GT finishers here, if at all possible. We'll be back shortly. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back here to Circuit de la Sarthe. We are just waiting for the officials to finish getting all of the distances calculated. This is going to get really interesting here. For those of you in the chat, now that the race is over, I can actually look at chat a little bit more aggressively. LMP Sauce, I am sorry, but I will not confuse you for Lucas, though, because your name is Sauce and not Lucas, so at least I will not confuse you. For Wolf Raven, 30 minutes? Yep, 30 minutes on the clock, and that is a response to PTG Eric, as Eric wanted to know, when is the time to get your mandatory final stop done? When that race timer says 30 minutes, you have to have all 4 of your stops done by the time that race timer says 30 minutes. Otherwise, you will be assessed a post-event penalty. With that said, we don't know what the penalty is. We have no idea what the end penalty will be for making your final stop afterwards. It could be 5,000 feet. It could be 10,000 feet. I think that Amaryllis was under the impression that he might be able to outdrive the penalty, potentially. But Amaryllis is not super far ahead of Lucas. The thing is that Lucas is likely going to get clipped a bunch. Also, Wolf Raven, I will be streaming 1 through 5 here in C Lobby. Then I'm going to jump in, do the A Lobby for Stint 7, so that way the main broadcaster there doesn't have to worry about a crossover point. And then I will be back, and I will be streaming the final lobby, Stint 12, early in the morning tomorrow. So Stint 5 is my last C Lobby stint today, but I will be streaming Stint 12 in the morning tomorrow. We're just waiting to see Dr. Ice move on the track. Once Dr. Ice, we see that car move on track up to the next mile marker. At that point, we will know that the officials will have gotten all of the distances, and we will be able to go ahead and start inviting our top finishers. And I really want to hear from our top GT finishers. And there's Dr. Ice moving on track to the next mile marker, I believe. So we're going to start inviting people into the lobby, into the Xbox party here. See if we can get any words from anyone. All right, now we see a lot of drivers dropping out. All right, and coming into the party is Dr. Ice and TNR Blade. We'll start with Dr. Ice. Dr. Ice, go ahead and include your audio in the Xbox party. I hear you. Can you hear me? All right, Dr. Ice, very interesting stint for you. It's a very interesting event for you overall. You were one of the early qualifiers. Typically, the best qualifying people are late qualifiers for TORA, but you were an early qualifier for this event. Started on pole and won, although you had a little bit of a fight there with Zabri. But walk us through that stint from your end. It looked like it was pretty clean and straightforward from our end. So now I have to ask, who's the other driver going to be in that car going into Stint 2? Wait, Dr. Ice, real quick. Apparently, the stream says your audio isn't included. Go to the Xbox chat and see if there is a way to include your audio. I'll double check my stream on my end. Try now. All right, go ahead and try and... Yeah, it looks like it was an issue on my end. You guys did nothing wrong. So,
okay.
I hate to ask, can you repeat all of that, Dr. Ice?
Yeah, so it was a pretty straightforward stint. Zabri had a wicked fast car in the first couple. Actually, he had a pretty fast car overall. Saw him pulling up on me around the first 6 laps. I knew it was going to be a battle. We went side by side in Indy. I backed out because I wasn't trying to go side by side in LMP1 cars there. Yeah, he unfortunately went off at Porsche curves. I'm not sure what happened there. I'm probably going to rewatch the broadcast to see what happened. But
I did not catch it. I'm sorry, I didn't catch what happened.
Yeah, heartbroken for him, but I'm sure he'll make up the time. Yeah, it was pretty straightforward stint for me.
All right, now I have to ask, who's going to be in that car for Stint 2?
So that is going to be TJ. Let me grab his gamer tag. Stint 2 is going to be TTJ111.
All right, someone I've known and raced with for several years, so we'll be keeping an eye on what he can do, see if he can back up on that fantastic win. But I will say, Dr. Ice, you really did a good job putting the freeze on the field today. If I get more time throughout the day, I'll look up more Batman and Robin, Mr. Freeze puns to attribute to you throughout the rest of the event.
Okay. Sounds good.
Right. Thanks for talking with us. Good job on the win. And now I'm going to talk with our third place finisher in the prototype category, TNR Blade. Blade, go ahead, make sure your audio is included. Interesting event. You kind of fought a little bit early on, but late in the event seemed like you spent a lot of time all by yourself. What was that stint like for you?
Yeah, really a stint of 2 halves, it must be said. You know, I, like you said, started dead last of the protos in class to get the stint going. Made pretty decent progress, got up to, well, there were 7 protos, so it was probably 5th or
8
so.
protos.
There were, you sure?
Yep.
Yeah, there were 8
I started
protos.
7th and there was no proto behind me. Either way, got up to about 5th, and then kind of stalled out behind Uninanimate and Jamesy there, who were having a bit of a ding-dong. Eventually got past them just through the pit cycle, was able to break a gap to them finally. Just a lot of Obviously everyone wants to go out and race because that's what we're here to do and have some fun. They're costing each other time racing like that, and with faster cars behind, it's, you're all you're doing is slowing everyone else down. But either way, good stint overall. Just wish I could have cleared them a little sooner. Maybe I would have had a chance to give Dr. Ace here a little bit of a run for his money.
So now I have to ask, who's going to be taking over in that car in Stint 2?
I believe that will be Sea Dwarf will be taking over. So hopefully he'll be able to make his way up through the pack a little bit quicker than I was. I believe he was our fastest driver in qualifying, so fingers crossed for him. I know he's had pretty consistently good pace through practice. So we'll wait and see. Real question is going to be Stint 3 on once we start getting our car moved up the pack in terms of the starting grid for each stint.
All right, one more general question overall. I do want to ask you both. Due to normally TORA Enduros are 3 stops mandatory. Today's event, 4 stops are mandatory. And you have to get all of them in within 90 minutes. I might be wrong, but from what I understand, that should make these stints very easy. Just throw on soft tires every time you pit, right? There should be no question about running mediums at any point in the prototypes. It's just all softs all the way through. Am I correct on this?
That would be correct, and there was really no question you were going to run softs anyway. Even if I don't think anyone, especially in the prototype class, was running a full tank of fuel at any point. But softs can easily last the entire distance on a full tank of fuel. Mediums, and it never gets to the crossover point where a medium tire becomes remotely faster. So no question, all these drivers should be running the soft compound tire, and if they're not, then boy, they have screwed up.
All right, well, in that case, thanks for jumping in and talking with us, both of you. It's always nice to be able to talk with our top results here. We're going to cut the stream off here, but we will be back in a few minutes as we get into Stint 2 here for the C Lobby. Already a lot of drama in the GT category. 3 different GT drivers could end up winning, all based on how the penalties turn out, and we'll bring more on that as the event goes on if there's any updates on that. But until next stream, which should only be in a few minutes, I've been your host for today's broadcast, Insanely 13. Thank you very much for joining us. Farewell, and goodbye, everyone.